Hello, welcome back to the Movie Loft. My name is Tyler, and it turns out I watch way too many movies to talk about, so I'm gonna start something new. I'm just gonna give a quick rundown and recap of all the things that I watch each month. That way I can make more in-depth videos on the movies that I really love. So, without further ado, these are the movies that I watched in October. Okay, so first, starting off where the movie Nights of Frights left off my last video, we watched the 2019 version of the Addams Family. And I'm gonna be honest, it made me chuckle quite a few times at how absurd and morbid the kids' shenanigans were. However, the movie really lacked in any sort of heart that I think they were going for. There is a clear message about being yourself, but it is just a little too heavy-handed. And the cast was great, but some of the character animation was, well, pretty fucking weird to say the least. Kids will probably really enjoy it, and adults can tolerate it. And I really enjoyed the morbid gags, and it honestly entertained me, so I'll give it a 7 out of 10. And I understand the animation was based on the original cartoon, but I found it really distracting, and it aged the film back about 15 years. Alright, so next we watched The Fog. Well, so actually this was just on in the background while we put up Halloween decorations, but basically what I got from it was So, if you want to know what The Fog is like, just watch that episode. And it starred the Scream Queen herself, Jamie Lee Curtis. But there was just nothing about the movie that was memorable. And it suffered the stereotypical flaws of the 70s and 80s horror, which are just dumb characters making dumb decisions. 4 out of 10. Okay, so next we watched I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House, which is available on Netflix. This movie had beautiful cinematography and setting. I loved the house. And it had this very poetic voiceover, which made it seem as if it were deep and had something important to say. But I think the project was just more pretentious than anything else. And the story didn't really lead to anything. 3 out of 10. Next, we watched The Color Out of Space. And holy fuck, did I love this movie. I had no expectations going in, but boy did it deliver on everything I hoped it would. I don't want to give anything away, so you can go in and blind like I did, but I was so surprised at the production value. The cinematography, gorgeous. Visual effects, mesmerizing. And I fucking loved the use of practical effects because it brought the movie to a whole nother level of disturbing. I loved the family dynamic and how they all interacted, and I was very impressed with Madeline, I think her name is Madeline Arthur's performance, but of course, Nicolas Cage was the real scene stealer. I love when directors know how to use his style of acting to its full potential, and we get some pretty great Nick Cage freakouts in this one. I highly recommend giving it a watch, because it is definitely one of the best movies I have seen in a long time, and it's just a good time. I'm giving it an 8.9 out of 10. It's not a masterpiece, and there are some characters that just didn't get enough development, and the script isn't gonna blow your mind or anything, but it was just a breath of fresh air, and I thoroughly enjoyed watching it, and I actually ended up buying it on 4K Blu-ray, so that's how much I liked it. Okay, so the next thing we watched was Attack the Block, and holy shit, did I love this movie too. I heard great things about it, but I just never got around to watching it for some reason. The dialogue is so snappy and hilarious, even if half the time I couldn't understand what they were saying. And the characters are really well written and relatable, and John Boyega gave a great performance in his first role. The pacing and editing was practically perfect, and barely allowed you time to relax, and I really liked the look of the creatures.
There's bear creatures chasing us! Big alien gorilla wolf motherfuckers, I swear!
It was just such a great concept and had great humor, a lot of heart, and a surprising amount of tension. Plus there's just a hint of some social commentary in there, and I just had a blast watching it. There is a side story involving a drug dealer that didn't really lead to anything and could have been completely removed and the movie would have been exactly the same, but other than that, I wouldn't change a single thing. I give it a 9 out of 10. If you love Edgar Wright movies and his style of humor and pacing and the editing, then you'll really love this movie. But next we watched another lesser known movie called A Nightmare on Elm Street. First of all, the premise is genius, because you can potentially get away from Michael Myers, maybe. But it is practically impossible to not fall asleep. The practical special effects just blew my mind as to how they were able to do that back then. Plus. It has Johnny Depp in his first on-screen role, which was really cool to see. Unfortunately, his character was the absolute worst.
Don't fall asleep.
I liked the main character Nancy and how creative and active she was about putting an end to the nightmare, but the adults were just the fucking worst.
Everything is gonna be alright! Everything's under control!
Just like that, you asshole!
And obviously, Robert Englund was a fucking perfect Freddy Krueger. But other than that, there weren't much stakes involved, other than a fear of death. But even the kills weren't that impactful, which I think has to do with a lack of tension. I give it a 6 out of 10. The film's concept is absolutely genius, and they created some of the most iconic horror visuals of all time. But in the end, I just didn't feel any sort of tension, and the adults were just so fucking dumb and irritating. Also, I couldn't get over the fact that the music just reminded me of Will Smith's A Nightmare on My Street.
On my street.
Next is another one of the most iconic horror movies of all time, and I finally watched Halloween. Unlike A Nightmare on Elm Street, which jumps straight into the dreams and kills, this movie practically takes the entire movie for Michael Myers to do what he does best, which I was a little disappointed by. And I felt like they showed Michael way too often, and they played the theme too often too. And the theme is great, but it would just play every time he was on screen, even if nothing was happening. Plus, there was just no tension because we constantly knew where Michael was like 90% of the time, and a few of his kills were just laughable. However, the final 20 minutes of the film were exactly what I had been waiting for. It was intense, and he was fucking motivated and felt like an unstoppable force, like the doctor had been describing him as the whole time. Jamie Lee Curtis was pretty good, honestly didn't scream as much as I thought she would, but she did her best to stay alive, which resulted in some pretty dumb decisions. But it made me want to watch the new one and see her as a badass and a more active character. I'll give it a 6 out of 10 as well. Okay, so next is Pet Semetary, the 1989 version. For starters, I really love the production design and the locations of the cemetery and the Native American burial ground, as well as the crazy ass shit that happens in the last act. The practical effects were fucking gruesome and absolutely disturbing, and I found it way scarier than the new one. Unfortunately, it was lacking in its performances, and I found the dad to be incredibly wooden.
Come back to me, Gage. What did we do tonight, Judd? Has anyone ever buried a person up there?
Which was especially apparent after having seen Jason Clarke's portrayal in the 2019 version because he's just a phenomenal actor. But it was way more disturbing in imagery compared to A Nightmare on Elm Street and Halloween and even the new one, so I'll give it a 6.5 out of 10, just a little bit above Halloween and A Nightmare on Elm Street, which is probably very controversial, but here we are.
Pet Semetary.
Okay, and next, I finally got to see the Blair Witch Project, and boy has it aged. The most fun part about the movie was that I had actually convinced my roommates that I was real. Unfortunately, it didn't last long once they looked it up for themselves, but other than that, it was just painfully obvious that the cast was improvising because they just kept repeating themselves over and over again, like,
Take the fucking map, man. I'm not playing head games, man. If anyone's playing head games, you're playing head games, but I'm not playing head games.
I don't have it. We have to go. I'm serious. I don't have it.
Are you fucking serious?
Fucking serious. I don't have the map.
Heather, that is so not cool, man.
I know it's not cool.
That is so not cool.
I know it's not cool.
I mean, that's the fucking, like, least responsible thing you could have possibly done, man.
and the amount of times where they would just be standing around talking about how they needed to get out instead of just fucking walking got so old so fast.
No, I don't have the map. We gave it back to you after map check yesterday. You've always had the map.
I know, and I've always had the map in the same place, and if it's not there, one of you had to have taken it.
I'm not going into your fucking pants to get your goddamn map, man.
I just checked my pocket. It's not in my pants.
Look, when I go in and get your map, all I want to do is get out of here, man. I'm not fucking around.
That's all I want to, man.
No, you want to stay here. You want to film rocks. You want to look around. You want to fucking, like,
Go.
Get this. You want to get that. Which way are we walking?
That way.
Dude, we're in the middle of the fucking woods.
If I had seen this when it had first come out, I probably would have been scared shitless just because it was the first of its kind. And no one knew if it was real or not. But because of its cultural significance and innovative idea, I'll give it a 4 out of 10. The film truly was a great concept, but with the amount of times that they just stood around and talked about the same shit, it just got really old and boring and kind of annoying, to be honest. The next movie we watched was Trick or Treat, and I had no idea what this movie was about, other than it is basically one of the most Halloween movies of all time, which isn't too far from the truth because it basically is just a love letter to Halloween. And it has everything you can want in a Halloween movie. It has vampires, werewolves, zombies, costumes, jack-o'-lanterns, and of course, kids getting murdered. It's got kids murdering kids, adults murdering kids, adults murdering adults, pumpkin creatures, werewolves, zombies, and vampires all murdering adults and kids. But in all seriousness, it was definitely worth a watch for Halloween, and I had a good time with it, but I just wish some of the stories and characters were a little bit more fleshed out or explained, especially with one in particular. And it was a little disturbing how nonchalantly they were all murdering children, but it definitely captured the spirit of Halloween. And I can understand its cult following and appeal for the Halloween season, but I'm gonna give it a 6 out of 10. Okay, the next movie we watched was Edward Scissorhands, and surprisingly, I had not watched the whole thing until now, considering my obsession with Johnny Depp and Tim Burton growing up. I love the kooky dark worlds that Tim Burton creates, and this one was very interesting for sure. I loved Johnny Depp's performance as the misunderstood and shy Edward. Winona Ryder was also great, and I loved the practical effects of Edward's suit, and the effect of the bits and pieces flying around as he cut up ferns and hair and stuff. The film was oddly sexual, and at the same time innocent, and really funny. All in all, it was a heartwarming tale, and I really liked the ending and Johnny Depp's performance. And I would say it was one of the better Burton and Depp collaborations. I'll give it a 7 out of 10. Next, we watched Unsane, which is an experimental film by Steven Soderbergh, filmed entirely using iPhone cameras. I think the film could have easily just been a gimmick, however, it really worked for me. It took away that feeling of detachment you get when you're watching cinema-grade cameras and how polished they look. Everything felt more personal and realistic, almost like a documentary. And the angles they were able to pull off by using a phone were just so different than any other film I've seen. And it added to the unsettling feel even more. So not only was it an interesting concept, I think it helped the storytelling visually. And speaking of the storytelling, it was an absolute roller coaster of thoughts and emotions for me. It has so many twists and turns, and Claire Foy gives an absolutely incredibly intense and emotionally raw performance as someone dealing with mental and emotional trauma. The film constantly leaves you guessing what is real and what is in her head, and I found the use of the phone to be a great device in getting across the tone of the film. That being said, Madison had the opposite opinion and found the camera to be incredibly distracting. So it can go either way. However, I think despite the limited resources and technology, they made a pretty good and creative movie, and I think it deserves an 8 out of 10 for that. And as a filmmaker, it's really inspiring to see that you can make a really good feature-length movie, and you don't need thousands of dollars in equipment to make it. You can just use a device that literally everyone keeps in their pocket. Okay, and finally, last but not least, we watched What We Do in the Shadows. And unlike most of the other films on this, I've watched this movie about 5 times now, and I love this movie. Taika Waititi is so funny to me, and a terrific writer and director, as well as actor. And he is complemented perfectly by Jermaine. The pacing drags a bit during the middle of the movie, but other than that, it's a great and chill watch. It's something you can just put on with your friends and family and just hang out and have a good time. And aside from the scripts and jokes, the production design, costumes, and makeup and special effects are all really well done and add to the humor of the film. There are so many great gags with their costumes and the way that they're able to make them float around. It's so great. However, I do realize the humor isn't for everyone, and this is very subjective. And the film really isn't about anything or trying to say anything relatively deep. It's just a good time and an enjoyable watch, and I love it, so I'm gonna give it an 8.5 out of 10. Okay, and that's it. Those are all the movies that I watched in October. I really enjoyed making it in this format, so I'm probably gonna stick to this each month. I have a lot of movies that I plan on talking about and that I wanna talk about, and now this allows me to focus more on those movies. So I'm really excited about this, and I hope you enjoyed this type of video. But what are your thoughts on the movies that I talked about? Have you seen Attack the Block and Color Out of Space? Because if you haven't, I highly suggest it. And if you have, please let me know what you think down below. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video, which hopefully will be a review. I mean, just look at that shit. Don't you just want to watch it just looking at these images? Oh, I completely forgot. Jack Skellington up for Halloween season, and I painted this myself. I'm very proud of it. But it's time for a change now that it's November. And I have another person painted on the back that I'm also very proud of, and that is Turnip Head from Howl's Moving Castle. So he's gonna live right back here. Okay, that's it. Goodbye.